Welcome, welcome everyone. This is Tami Brunk with Earth Sky Woman podcast, and I am here with Elke Duerr, a wonderful friend and just a human, so a sacred human who I so enjoy. Elke, I just enjoy your energy every time I see you out there. You know, and when you were on Facebook, you know, from a distance, I was like, if I want to feel hopeful about the world, who do I go to? And I don't mean like toxic positivity. I don't mean like not looking at the whole picture. I mean like somebody who's out there doing it and grounded and connected. So just to say a little about Elke, and we met in New Mexico years ago, right?
Yeah, a long time ago.
Yeah, it's a long time ago. And so I think we had shared communities of friends, dear friends, who were curanderas and curanderos, and who also were lovers of the earth, and we were kind of shared that community. Right? But I just so I wanted to bring you on again for that reason. That over the years, you know, I've really enjoyed connecting with you. Elke is the founder of the Web of Life Foundation, and she is an incredible filmmaker who has created a number of films that are profoundly inspiring about wolves, about bison. As I'm going to let you speak more to that, actually, Elke. But I just see you as a woman who's deeply connected to the earth, as an Earth Sky woman who is rooted in the earth, and also such a cosmic being on the level that you're really connected to. You're connected to the spirit and soul in such a beautiful way. So, with that, do you want to just say anything else about yourself, about who you are, and anything from the heart in this moment?
Well, who I am is always changing.
Yeah.
But at the moment, I am, I've always been deeply connected to all life forms, to all life, my whole life. And nobody and nothing could ever take that away. People have tried because, for example, my family, of course, they wanted me to become somebody, to be somebody, and not just be connected to the earth and to the animals and be communicating with all life. But so it's been difficult sometimes to hold my ground, but I never gave up in my whole life. I've been in tune with the earth, in touch with everybody and everything else. And when I was little, growing up in Germany, they were starting to use the first insecticides and pesticides and all that. And I saw the deaths of my beloved swallows and lots of other insects, and subsequently of the larger birds, and subsequently of the animals that ate those animals. And so I saw the circle of life and the web of life and how connected it was from the get-go, because I grew up on an organic little farm in Germany. We didn't have the money or the inclination to use insecticides, pesticides, and fertilizers. And as a little girl, I was walking along, collecting ladybugs, and then releasing them on our fields of like sugar beets or feed beets. That was our so-called pest control. And I always thought there was no pest. There was no pest at all. And actually later on, I learned from a friend who's a biologist that our so-called pests are actually here to take out unusual and not so benevolent forms of life, like monocultures. That's when we started having monocultures. That's when we started having problems, so-called problems, but with insects or other animals. But they were just really doing their job of taking out something that didn't fit in the ecosystem. So from the beginning, I was really, really connected, and I never really stopped being that, no matter what the surrounding areas were or what the pressure on me was. I kept being the embodiment of the earth. I always say I'm the outside of it. I'm the earth in Elke form, or walking. I am embodied earth. I am I'm the earth in the form of me. And so I never stopped that. And I remember my grandpa one day, because I grew up with 4 generations in the same house, we were walking around and he would tell me all the names of our fields. And one was called the Stony Field, which is self-explanatory. But then we came to one and he said, and this is called the wolf trap. And that's when it was really, that was so eye-opening to me. I said, the wolves, where are they? Where are they? And he's like, oh, don't worry. Oops, I have a cat that just jumped on.
Good timing there.
Yeah. So
punctuating your story.
Yeah, exactly. She was trying to support me here. So, so he said, where are they? I said, where are they? Where are they? And he said, oh, don't worry about them. This is where our ancestors killed the last wolf, so you and I would be safe. But that was a pivotal moment. I was maybe 6, 7 years old, and I said, but nobody asked me. I want them here. I want them here. Why did they kill them without asking me? And he's like, what? Because it's so hard on exterminating them. And here I said, I'll bring him back, Grandpa. I'll bring him back. We need the wolves. And he did that. He really did. But I think now it's from a different realm, because I can feel him and I can sense his like, oh, yeah, keep going.
Beautiful. Awesome. Elke, thank you. I read that story before we started, and I was seeing that story about your waking up moment with the wolves. And just briefly, because I want to hear so much more about that, I'll just say we are really of two hearts, because I was also raised, my grandfather was a cattle farmer, and I was also raised on an organic farm. And my mom actually she noticed the impact of 7 on her plants when she first put it on there, and then she realized what it was doing. It was making us all sick, and so she started organic farming, and nobody else was doing it. But my grandfather also, with his father, would go out into the hills and the hollows in the Ozark Mountains in Missouri, and they would trap wolves, literally the last red wolves out of the Ozarks. I know it. I mean, the wolves, right? And the bobcats and the mountain lions, they would do it for pelts, because they had no money. They were dirt poor farmers, and they would get 25 cents, 50 cents a head for these animals. And so, like you, when I heard those stories, I was like, that's not okay. We need to bring these things back. So I really hear your story. I think it's a universal story that you've lived into in such a powerful way.
Yeah. Yes, and now is the time for the animals to return. And what happened was, actually, also when I was a kid, there would be plaques in the forest saying, last wolf killed here 1812, last wolf killed here 1752. I'm making up the date.
Wow. Right.
But they were even proud of it. And then when the settlers came here to the United States, they kept doing what they'd always done. They didn't give the animals a chance, and it just kept going and going. There was no like, well, maybe we can do this differently. Nope. Right. There was this binary way of being that has been so prevalent for so long. Either wolf or cattle and dogs. Either weeds or vegetables. There was never any notion of like, this is all important. That's why I founded the Web of Life Foundation, because of the Web of Life. And we can't just take anybody out willy-nilly, and expect everything to work anymore, because it doesn't. Right. And especially if you take out a keystone predator, like the wolf, who is so important, whose presence on this earth affects so many other animals. We can't expect it to keep going and function, because it won't. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so true, and so essential to remember that, to help. And we've been through this whole journey now where, I want to speak to where you are now too, just kind of center you in place, right? And then to speak more about all of that. So when we first started our conversation, I said, Elke, where are you? And you told me you were in the Gila in New Mexico.
And of course, that's where we originally knew each other in New Mexico, but you said that's where you kind of started all of this. And you were telling me some really exciting things about what you're seeing. So can you tell us more about where you are and what's happening now?
Well, I am in the Gila right now in southwestern New Mexico. And this is where everything started, because this was my first backpacking trip like 32 years ago here in the Gila. And by the way, I came to this country not to study or for economic reasons or for love of somebody in particular. I came here because I wanted to be in an area or in a country where there were still wild animals and wilderness. And I'd always told my parents that from the get-go, that one day I'd be going away and living where there were wolves and bears and wild ones. And they were always laughing at me until I left. And that was that. So it all started in the Gila for me because that was my first backpacking trip. That's where I saw my first bears in my life, and a mountain lion, wolves, and
wow.
Yeah, all these wild animals that I love so much. And I remember the wolves haven't been around here officially. There has been one here and there, but when I first started here, there weren't any wolves. And so I remember distinctly thinking, well, the wolves need to be back here. And when they started introducing them, I felt like I wanted to be their voice and do something for them, and they're thriving. That's always what I'm doing. Like, some animal comes to me and connects with me and talks to me and wants me to relay some messages to all the other humans, because I do communication with all life forms, not just humans. I speak 4 or 5 languages,
right.
But that's not what I'm talking about. I'm communicating with all the other life forms. And so they always picked me and like, please do something. And so the wolves picked me and said, do a documentary about us. And that was at the time when they were gaining in the hearts of many here in New Mexico and elsewhere. But you know, as a woman, to make a film about wolves was quite something, because there was nothing like that out there. Like no independent documentary. Like
right.
There are many more now, and but it was kind of like a little pioneer work, and I had to work through a lot of hierarchy and rank order and pack order, but not from the wolves. So it was very, very exciting. It was very, very exciting. And I remember at that time I had a neighbor who is a Navajo medicine man, and I told him, I'm going to go down to the Gila and I'm going to see my first wolves, because I was still living in Albuquerque, and I living there as well, and I couldn't really go there that much. So I said, and it was a 5-hour drive at least. So I said, you know, I really need to see some wolves, and I'm calling them in. He said, yeah, let's call them in. So he did a ceremony to call in the wolves, so they would know my intentions and who I was and what I was doing, even though they had called me. I was calling them in. And I went with a few people, and they were telling me, it takes 9, 10, 11. They had done the statistics. It takes 8, 9, 10 times to see a wolf, right? And I'm like, oh, no, we called them. They're coming now. And so I was setting up my tent, and I could feel them. I'm like, oh, they've just walked by here. They've just walked by here today, you know, because that wild part in myself was so activated. It's always activated, but it was extra activated. And so I went down, you know, to the hatchback of my car to get out some more camping supplies, and then I could feel them again behind me. And I turn around, and there's 4 wolves looking at me. It was amazing, because the other people had only seen wolves fleeing from them, you know, not like walking up to them and or like running away as soon as they were seen or discovered, or not hanging out that much. But those guys really came over and checked me out to see if I was worthy of doing a documentary about them. And I saw one lone wolf by myself that day again who was checking me out, who stood right in front of me in the car on the dirt road and looked at me for a long time, kind of like, all right, I know you now. Now we'll get started working with each other. And when I do a documentary, it's always a co-production. I call it the human spirit, great spirit, and then whatever animal it is, wolf spirit, otter spirit, or bison spirit, co-production. Because I'm not doing it about them. I'm doing it with them. And that's really one of my passions, to do this life together, to do this work together, so we understand each other, and there's always some kind of communication. And I'm always communicating to them who I am, what I'm doing, why I'm there. And so it's been this amazing experience for me, because there's other filmmakers or people or humans now that everybody's equipped with a camera who are engaging in not so ethical things and practices to get in touch with animals. But they see animals and other life forms as the other, as an object. And so they do things that are really dangerous for the animals later on to get good footage. But I don't do that. I don't need to do that from the get-go. You know, I don't even want to get so much footage, because often if it's an endangered species, there's not so many of them. And I don't want to go out there and disturb them. I want them to thrive first, you know, before we go out and do much with them. You know, because that's using them. And that's not right, because we have lost the wildness inside of ourselves. Now we have to go out and find it somewhere else, you know, because we only feel alive if we see a bear or a wolf, you know. We only feel like we are somebody if we've survived a wolf encounter. And that's very helpful to these.
That's not what it's about, right?
Yeah, because we always attach it to wanting to be somebody, to have an encounter with an animal, be somebody, you know, get all these hits on YouTube or whatever. I don't want to do that, and I don't need to do that. You know, we have our understanding, we have our little meetings, and that's that. And they're fearless, empty, and loving. I always call it. Like, I don't fear at them, because that really has an impact on them, especially if it's mom and her cubs or pup. If I go out with fear, which I don't have anyways, but if somebody else has fear of them, then they sense that, and they have to do something to help them, or to have them be safe. Or people nowadays go out and they engage in all kinds of substances, you know, and that's not a good thing, because the animal doesn't see your Gucci pants or your whatever or your outfit. The animal feels the entity that's on you from the substances you've been taking, and then again they have to protect themselves and their offspring from you. So it's really not a good idea to engage in that, because something could happen to the person. So not being fearful, empty as in not wanting anything from them, because we're in such a consumptive society. We always want to have something from everything, from nature, from animals. And now there's a video that said, "Nature, the new Prozac." And it really made me mad when I saw that. Everybody thinks it's so funny. But I'm like, no way. You know, like, she is our home. She's our everything. She's not a drug. She's not Prozac. And what would you feel like if all kinds of depressed and unhealthy people would come to your living room all the time, you know, wanting to be healed, you know? So it doesn't work. So empty as in not wanting anything, and loving as in just coming from love, awareness, and consciousness, because we have to be conscious of where we are. We are often in the living room of another being that used to be in the whole continental US and now has a sliver of their former habitat left. So the Gila for me is one of those places. And I'm down here, and I'm so delighted to be sheltering in place here, because guess who came to me next in line to want documentary or a video about them and who they really are is the returning jaguars and also
wow.
yeah, also a representation of the feminine, the wild feminine.
Absolutely.
Yes. Sorry.
Like Ishel.
Yeah.
There she is.
Yeah.
So Elke, I wanted to ask you just briefly before you go into that, could you tell listeners more about the Gila? Because it's so interesting. I was just interviewing another friend and filmmaker, Kumika Hayashi, and she's in Ecuador, in one of the most biodiverse regions of the globe. And you also, right? Tell us a little more about the Gila so people understand where that is.
It's in southwestern New Mexico. It's not very densely populated. It borders onto Mexico and Arizona. And we had the most endangered land mammal here, and it's the Mexican gray wolf is still endangered.
Right.
So we have it's very, very diverse. It's a very beautiful place that's not very densely populated. It's heavily mined in the area, so there is some fallout from people's health and the health of the land. That I have to say up front, but it's still this wonderful place where there's a migratory path between Mexico and New Mexico, and the animals are passing through and doing their thing. And so we have, like, when I made the film 10 years ago, we had 50 Mexican gray wolves. Now we have 160 something.
Wow. It's incredible.
That's incredible. Yeah, they are coming back. So the cats also, the big cats also had this as their stomping ground. But as I mentioned earlier on, with the settlers came this thing of like, oh no, it's us and our sheep and our dogs and our families and our cattle, and that's it, and everybody else is varmint. Is kind of competition to what we are doing here, and they need to go. So it's still in the heads of many, even though a friend of mine told me that there's a rancher. She saw some report on TV that this rancher is so happy because he saw a big cat 3 times. And I don't know if it was that in his lifetime, if that was in Mexico, but before he dies, he wants to see a cat one more time. And in my wolf documentary, he also always wanted to see a wolf in the wild, and he just loved the animals, and he loved the bears and the lions, and because of how he managed his cattle, he never had any losses.
Elke, are you talking about Jim Winder?
No, Eugene, my friend.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I used to work for and with a rancher who was supporting wolf reintroduction and all that. But Gene, okay, yeah, I've heard of him. Wow.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah, he was 94 when he died, and he had never seen a wolf in the wild, but he knew there were some around somewhere in the next 50 miles or so. We tried very hard for him to see some wolves. So we have these people, but I think there's still a lot of peer pressure out there.
Yes.
To have to hate them, and you don't belong to your buddies if you love wolves.
Right.
So, like I remember at a party in Montana, this young man was circling around me, and finally he got up his nerve, and he said, "I heard you work with wolves." And I'm like, "Yes, I am working with wolves, and I love it." And he's like, "Well," he said, "I love them too." He said, "I love them too, but I heard they are varmint and we need to kill them. And I love it when they're howling. And what should I do? All my buddies are killing them. They're getting all these wolf tags and they're killing them because for like $20 or so you can kill 5 wolves." And And so anyways, I said, "What should I do? What should I do?" I said, "Do you have children?" He said, "Yeah, 2 little ones or 3 little ones, something like that." And I said, "Well, do you want them to hear wolves?" And he said, "I do." And I said, okay, there you have your answer.
Yeah.
You can't really manipulate people. I don't like to argue with people about these things because it's a form of violence. You know,
Yeah.
I'm just here like today to share how I see the world. Now, how you see the world and everybody else is a whole different story. But I'm here to share how I see the world and to share with you what is possible.
Yes.
And so in the Gila, a lot is possible. And it's a wonderful place. Like the house where I'm at, you know, I've had so many encounters. There's a little band of 13 javelinas. They're peccary, but they look like little wild boar, but they're in the same family, I think, as the raccoons, you know, and they're awesome, you know, and they're always hanging out. And one of them has a hurt leg, and but one of her children is always waiting for her, and everybody's waiting for her, and they're letting her eat because she's not so fast. And so it's so then I have deer, and just 2 days ago I look up and I'm like, so this deer is like grazing like 2 feet next to me or so.
Wow.
And this deer is right there, and we have this conversation about this place and the fearlessness and the love. And a few hours later, she came back and introduced her daughter to me.
Oh. Wow.
Then I've been having beautiful encounters with snakes. I was just sitting one day, and all of a sudden I see this movement. And it's like, later on I measured because I sort of remembered where the head was, where the tail was. But this like 7 foot, 8 foot, no, 6, 7 foot rattlesnake came right up to me.
Wow, yeah.
Without rattling. And just soaked each other in, because there is coexistence and it is possible.
Yes.
I'm not saying go after rattlesnakes.
No.
Try this or whatever. You know, I'm just saying, you know, when you're really coming from that fearless, empty and loving place, then these connections are very possible. That I honored that snake, and I was fearless.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that so much.
Yeah.
Fierce, loving, empty, fierce, and loving.
Yes.
Yeah.
I make a video about that.
That's so beautiful.
Yeah.
You make a what?
I'll make a video about that one of these days.
You should. That's really potent, because I think so many of us, it's so essential to remember how to be a good guest. Yeah. You know, and that's part of what you're saying, right? How to be a good guest, how to remember our manners, in a sense, with our other relations, our other relatives. Yes. Because we were taught the opposite. We were taught to be very rude. So we have to unlearn the rudeness that came from misunderstanding and separation. I loved you telling the story about the wolves, because when I went to Idaho in my late 20s, I was so privileged to be, I worked as a park ranger, and I worked in Idaho with the Nez Perce tribes, and we did a lot of work. I did little presentations all across the state around wolves, which were, of course, not very popular, because when I was there, they had reintroduced them, and they had done very well. So it was so exciting to be in that place at that time where they were coming back. They were doing well. But to see, you know, as you're saying, I understand what you're saying about violence, doing violence to people, because it was difficult in a sense to be we were kind of proselytizing, right? We were like, you know, this is important. We were trying to be a voice for the wolves. Mm-hmm. And it was very difficult, because the people who were closest to the land often were the ranchers. Yeah. And they were also often impoverished in many ways. Yeah. You know, their livelihood was at stake. So there was that whole tension, you know, between environmental and ranching communities that was so unfortunate. And I like your approach. I think it feels like a very feminine approach to the way that you simply share who you are and what you love. That is, you know, because you're being fierce, empty, and loving with other humans.
Yeah, exactly. Not only
with their spirits.
Not anybody, you know, I don't inflict who I am on other people. It's more like just let my light shine, whatever
Yes.
that day. And then, if somebody wants to ask me, they can. And if they don't want to, they don't have to. And actually, the wolves taught me that. I remember at the beginning, 10 years ago, sometimes when you see all these things and experience all these things, it can get a little like, oh, this is harsh. It could be so easy, but it's so harsh. But I don't feel that way anymore. But I used to a little bit when I was out filming. And they were the wolf family, and the father and the mother only had 3 legs each. One got shot, and one got trapped up. And they found, they were together, and they were raising 4 puppies together, and they had taken down some cattle, and that could have been really avoided because it's easy to move the cattle away from the den, you don't need to So, but they were going to trap the wolves again. And again, one had lost a leg by trapping, so already. And so I was like, oh, that night in my tent, I was like, oh, humans, myself too. And that was my internal battle just as well as my external.
Yes.
That's me too. I do what I call stupid stuff as well, before the awareness or the consciousness and stop doing it or whatever. And so, I was still kind of like, oh, why didn't they move the cattle? And so, but then when I was starting to fall asleep, I could hear the wolves starting to howl around me. And when their babies were howling too, and when they have to learn everything just like human babies, and they had to learn how to howl, so their howling was more like and it made me laugh, and it made my heart sing, and it made me get out of my angry mood. And as I was falling asleep, I had this dream, and in the dream the wolves came and they said, Elke, 2 legs, 3 legs, 4 legs, we just are, and we keep on living until we cross over one day. And we don't blame you, we don't say it's your fault and you could do better, and these whatever funky humans. No, we just keep on living and don't judge. And we suggest that you should do the same. Don't judge your fellow humans, don't judge yourself, because that's very important too. Just keep on living. Otherwise, you'll just make another film, but you want to make a film that really portrays us. And so I put that in the film, and in the morning I got out of the tent, and there were all these wolf tracks all over around my tent. So they had come, and they had imparted this wisdom to me in my sleep, because that's when my mind wasn't thinking about.
Yes. I love that. That's very healing. Thank you for that story.
Yeah. So it's just, and then also I have another story for you that's very healing. So whenever I did outreach in wolf country with children of ranchers where the wolves were around, just talking about who wolves are, not like, pushing them on anybody, but just telling people who wolves really are. And here is my cat.
Well,
so anyways,
there's cat energy.
Yeah, there's cat energy. So the children or the students would come to me and give up their recess or wanting to give up their lunch time, and they would look around to see if anybody was watching, and then they would say, Miss Elke, I love the wolves, I love the lynx, I love the bears, but my dad and my grandpa, they're killing them. So I'm like, okay, are you gonna get the ranch? I'm like, okay, how are you gonna do it? Because
right, that's right.
We can talk to your grandpa and to your father, because they're still in that mindset from way before, like there's too many wolves and there's fewer people, and now there's a lot of people and there's only a few wolves. So things have to change, but they're still in that older mindset. So you, in 10 years, when you get the ranch, you can do it differently, and you can make sure that you practice whatever it is that's coming from you, that's conducive to coexistence.
Yes.
Maybe it protecting cattle and livestock more, or like chasing the wolves away with guard dogs. And by the way, I found it's not just that wolves are killing cattle willy-nilly. Often there's something wrong with the cattle. That job. And I wish we would really work on that more, because on that awareness, because I know of a case in Europe where the wolves had taken down some cattle, and then they took the remaining cattle and replaced it with really young heifers. And they put up a camera, and then they saw the wolves, going straight by the cattle and towards the forest where there was deer. Yeah. So.
Wow. Yes, that's so interesting. When was that?
That was just maybe 5 years ago, because biologists in Europe, and also one of the people, because it's so funny, they are doing compensation programs in Europe, and by the way, the wolves are reintroducing themselves to Europe, actually. They had, because when people stopped killing them, and when we had the fall of communism, because all the borders were heavily guarded, so border guards are often nervous because there's a movement, and they're not allowed to let anybody pass, and so they take a shot in that direction. So they were killing all the wolves trying to cross the border river from Poland into Germany. And if a wolf made it, then in Germany the Forest Service people would kill them. But so this is how there was no more migration and no more wolves. But with the fall of communism, and when all the guards left, the first wolves started crossing in 96. And instead of killing them, the Forest Service people in Germany said, let's see what happens. And nothing happened. They didn't kill any cattle or sheep. It was years after that, before people even got wind of their presence, right? So often these animals are now reintroducing themselves because they can. And there's cost to us. You don't even have costing us millions to reintroduce these wolves or whatever. Or they reintroduced themselves into Montana, into northern Montana from Canada. They just came back down because there was so much logging that they had lost habitat. And so they just came south. Yeah. So.
Oh my gosh, Elke, that's so powerful the way you said that, because you know what it makes me think about? It makes me think about the wildness inside of each of us and how so many of us have been colonized, on the inside, and what that process is, and that we don't have to reintroduce wildness. No. We just have to create a welcoming environment inside of ourselves, right? With presence and what else do you think? What might it look like in our inner ecology to invite wildness back in?
Well, my friend Pater from the Nakota, from the Assiniboine, he always says, nothing is lost. Everything is still here waiting for us to wake up. And taking us to a wonderful spot, because I feel it's all tied to like self-love. Because really,
I'm getting chills when you say that, actually.
Yeah, because it's really, we always think we are doing something wrong, and we are not good enough, and we're not pretty enough, and we're not, it's just, so without, so if we're bringing all this into nature, nature and the wildness inside won't be, responding to us in a very benevolent way, because we're so, so caught up in our suffering and in all these kind of tumultuous old emotions, and I feel like really nothing and nobody can colonize us, because I'm a good example of that. And tried when I was a kid, and they did it from love. It's because we've lost so many family members in the Holocaust because they were different. So they wanted me to be the same, so nothing would happen to me, right? But I just let it happen. And I even talked to my dad, and I said, Dad, what was the hardest part of raising me? well, you just knew who you were and you wouldn't let us talk, or, punish any sense into you. So, so often we talk about colonization as if we were victims. And that's the first part, like if we still feel like we're victims of something, then we won't be able to access that wild part, because the wild part is not a victim. The wild part is going out there, living the biggest, most grandiose, most wonderful, loving, connected life that we can. So one thing is really to get out of being a victim and being, a product of somebody else, but going inward and just finding all these tools and all these things that we've been given naturally that help us, thrive in a different way. Because if I look at like living here, there's really in this country, or even living in Germany or whatever, there's really no reason to be a victim of anything, because nobody's going out there punishing me for who I am or for what I'm doing, like it's just, and there's the freedom to speak about these things, to speak about things that I'm passionate about. And I can really, but most importantly, it's not so much the external freedom, it's the internal freedom that I gave myself to be who I truly am, and to not turn to anything that people were trying to push me into or lovingly coax me into, but really say, no, that's not me. That's not why I'm here. And another thing is really consciousness. And we are back at nature with that, because nature is really a portal into higher consciousness. And that's why we really, and wildness is too. And so is art, and so is spirituality, and so are a few other things. Or maybe a practice or whatever, a spiritual practice. But nature is definitely a portal into a higher consciousness, because you cannot be oblivious and live in nature or be in nature. And which brings me to another thing is that wildness lives in the city as well. We don't have to go to Yellowstone National Park or Glacier National Park. Actually, that's not such a great to find wildness, right? Or the last wildness, in search of the last wildness. Because these poor animals, like 8 million people driving through every year. When I was talking with them about what they needed, they said, at least we have winter when everything is closed. If we had that kind of exposure year round, we would die from exposure. So I have this wonderful story, of the wildness inside of you that can happen in the city. And in this case, it's the biggest city in Germany, 4.5 million people, Berlin, also the capital. Wow. Like everybody's on lockdown and the kids had to be home, and all of a sudden everybody is looking around and finding all kinds of animals, Right.
I love that.
This bird has always been around, because you had to run out of the house at 6:30, and you came back at 7:30, and when it was dark, and you never saw that bird, so people are discovering things, and there's wildlife people that are, that have hotlines, or that have people call, people can call them and ask questions. And there was this little boy, and he said, I have a bumblebee at home, on the balcony of an apartment somewhere in Berlin. And the bumblebee is really acting funny, and so the person said, there's probably a queen, and they need some food now, and they're acting funny. They don't have what they need, and it was cold again, and so why don't you do this, and this, and take care of the queen, because she will start more bumblebees. And so the little boy was so excited, on the wildness inside of a child, and called all his friends and told them, I have a queen at home. I have a queen at home. And he called back the wildlife person and said, could you, they don't believe me. Could you tell everybody that I have a queen at home? That it's really a queen. So, wonder of of wonder and awe and love can be anywhere. And often
Yes.
it's more present maybe around your house than it is in the wilderness, because in the wilderness there's so much fear of everything. People are so armed. There's bear spray, and there's the gun, and there's the dog, and there's the this, and there's the that. So they can't really enjoy it as much as they can maybe enjoy a bumblebee or a certain bird in a city. And also I've learned that there's more pollinators in cities now, because people have rooftop hives, and they're also now becoming very conscious, like, of dogs and people getting sick on sprayed lawns, so that they often have petitions to the city they live in to not spray public places. So now the pollinators are coming back to the cities because they're less sprayed and less toxic than the fields. So,
wow, that is so interesting.
Yeah, isn't that awesome? And that wilderness is still here. And I actually wanted to ask you if we could use the last 5 minutes to access that a little bit more and do a little
please
meditation. I don't know how much time
we do
for one more question or whatever.
Yes.
Like
that would be wonderful.
The last 5 minutes and guide us all back to that space that never went away.
I love that. Yes, please. That's so perfect. So I guess my last question would be, and I feel like we've been talking about what gives us hope. You know, we kind of started with that. I'm going to ask you the question, do you think that we as humans, what do you think is like the most positive kind of role we can play in the earth? You know, you talk about, I'm going to be who I really am, right? It's like the species of Elke is going to be who she is.
Yes.
So I wonder what that is, you know, and there's something in you, a spark or something that supported you in that, right? In your spirit, your soul, whatever that is.
Yeah.
I don't know if this question is going to make sense, but from your perspective, what might be the kind of the healthy role of a human species in this global planet habitat? What did we, you know, and this might come from working with indigenous people too, you know, what do you think is our role as a species?
Wow, to love and to evolve, because a lot of other species, maybe they can go only so and so far, but we can go all out with our human evolution and with our not just being little fearful humans anymore who are like barely surviving. But by the way, I coined the word, and I don't know if I really coined it, but as far as I know, I did. I coined the word thrival, from survival to thrival.
Good word. Words are important.
Yeah, because we have been barely surviving for so many years, you know, and it's always about having and having more than the other and protecting what we have and hoarding. That's just the most basic human expression that we can be. There's so much more in us, and if we allow it to come out, then it's a beautiful thing. And I call it reciprocal relationships with everybody. Not seeing everything as a commodity, something to be exploited or used or worn or sold or whatever, right? But just like, I look at it from the standpoint of reciprocity. When I go and say, hey guys, what do you need? What do you cats need from us? You know, what do you wolves need from us? You know, what can we deliver for all the wonderful gifts that you're giving us here on this planet, you know, and the role you're playing. And even if you're not spiritual at all, or not inclined, you know, to communicate with any other life forms, you know, you can't help it, but you have to realize and also acknowledge the roles that these animals and these other species are playing. And when they're gone, you know, what we have left is really something with lots of holes in it. So even if you see it from a scientific point, you know, if you if you run from spirituality, you can't run from all these facts.
Right.
That
Right.
it's connected, and that it will really also affect us. Like where there's no wolves, there's a lot more chronic wasting disease in deer and elk. Where
Yep.
we keep these
Totally.
animals in big herds together and we feed them so that the hunters have it easy or for whatever purpose, and there's no wolf sticking out the sick ones. It's kind of like coronavirus, usually there's small herds and they're all over the place and they don't spread it so much. But if we put them together in these herds and there's a fence around them and they can live and there's no wolf sticking out the old sick and weak ones, then the species are going down. In Germany, they took out all these animals, and in the end, they only had the wild boar left. So what looked good on a wall was, because there weren't any more big antlers or wolves or whatever, what looked good hanging on a wall was an animal like the wild boar with the big tusks. So they took all the big males, and they created a dwarf version of the wild boar until they noticed it, because now the little runts of the litter basically are like, wow, now I have the breeding right,
Oh, that's funny. Wow.
Because the big ones were all gone.
Yeah.
And they had to do that to experience that, because we didn't know any better, and I'm not blaming anybody, but I think it's almost funny, because we always want these big ones. And
it's very strange. Yeah.
But they know the population is back to normal.
Wow. Yes. Wow. How interesting. Oh, I love that. So, and I wanted to just say, when you talk about our function and you talk about our capacities, it makes me think of Paul Shepard. As an author, he was someone who believed that every human being has access to the intelligence of every species. And so when some species go extinct, then we as humans lose some of our full capacities. And I always loved that as an idea.
Yes. And we have also put up all these barriers between us and nature and all this fear. And I'm not saying, just wander around aimlessly, fearlessly. No,
right.
I'm just...
it doesn't sound like you're saying that.
Being really awake and aware when you go to the wilderness. No earphones, no any of that. And then really it's now time for us to access that wildness again. Because that wildness is kind of, for me, is an inner knowing.
Yes.
You can call it intuition, or anything, but my mind is often not able to help me, but my inner knowing is, and it comes from the inside, and I call it the inner wild. And, and I'm so glad I kept that. And it doesn't mean that I have to, now tan hides and walk barefoot all year and live in a tent, even though I do a lot of tenting, but it doesn't mean I have to go back to this old tribal way. No, we can live that in the city, in a house, but if your inner wild tells you, now you need to get out of the house and spend some time outside sitting quietly in nature, then I would always do that, because it has nothing to do with what civilization is doing, that houses are bad and cars are bad or whatever. But we need to look at the impact that we have on nature.
Yes.
And if we come from the inner wild, then there's knowledge and wisdom that will always put nature and other life forms into the equation from a more reciprocal standpoint and a less human-centric.
Yes.
And it's to me, it's a very rewarding way of living. One said, a biologist, he once said, if we all went out there and thought of nature and giving something back, we wouldn't be depressed. Because and I'm not saying that everybody, who's depressed is deprived of reciprocity. No, I'm just saying that, when we are part of everything, it makes us more in tune and more alive and less prone to other things that are called Zivilisationskrankheiten, the diseases of civilization, we call them.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you so much, Elke.
You're very welcome. It's an honor to be here and talk about how I live, and we can also call it my embodied living. You know, like not just talking about it. Maybe in the 70s, 80s, we sat around in cafes and talked about how bad things are, and you know, and how intellectual we are. But now we have to really go out and live it.
Yeah. So much more fun.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Beautiful.
Nature responds and life responds in so many ways, and our lives take all these unexpected, unplanned turns.
Beautiful. Yes. And it sounds to me like part of what you're saying too is that you can't be inauthentic or not yourself in nature and not have it reflected back to you.
Yes.
Basically, it's a mirror. There's a really potent mirror. Yeah.
Yeah, it's very potent. It's one of the big mirrors and the big portals.
Yep.
Different consciousness. Because it won't work with earphones and gear and equipment and trips around unconsciously.
Yep.
Fire. Yes.
Yes. Yeah. So
and the wild is everywhere, you know? You don't have to go to southwestern New Mexico or to Yellowstone National Park, you know? It's everywhere. Just go find it. Find it inside and find it outside of yourself, wherever you are, because then everything changes.
Beautiful. Yay, thank you.
You're welcome.
So let's do this exercise.
Yeah.
Do you have time?
Yes. Do you have time, or are you on the call?
No, it's perfect. It's perfect.
So we were all these bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, connected children once, you know, and then life kind of caught up with us, and there was all this stuff from society, and now you have to do something real, and now you have to do this, and now you have to be that, and now you have so anyways. So we have it all inside of us. So please sit down comfortably, and I call it a date with the inner wild. Sit comfortably, put your feet on the ground. Even if you're on the 5th floor, it doesn't matter. Whatever your ground is, put your feet there. Close your eyes. Let's take a few deep breaths together. And this is a highly individual, collective journey. We can only take it alone. And then later on, we will see that as more and more of us are taking it, it will change the world from the inside out. So let's take a few breaths. Deep breaths together. Let's take one into your heart center. It's nothing to do with the mind. The mind has its purpose too, but right now we're going to the heart. We're not thinking, we're not comparing things to the past. This is all fresh. It's a beginner's mind coming from not knowing. We're breathing into our heart. And we're finding that little girl or that little boy that we once were, maybe 3, 4, 5 years old, collecting caterpillars and watching them hatch, watching fish in the pond, listening to the birds, seeing that there was any kind of creature that needed us, maybe a bird with a broken wing or somebody who had a hurt leg or whatever. And that we had this wonderful, wonderful compassion. And that we could feel right into that other creature. And that we were hugging trees and planting our feet in the mud and getting what we call dirty, which is really not a good word, because dirt and soil and earth are honored deeply by us. They are not dirty. And let's find that little child, wherever he or she is sitting under a tree, or chasing around, or seeing a little mouse, or getting so excited because there was a deer, or they heard their first wolf howl. All that excitement and that beauty. Find that little child and sit next to them and take their hand. And tell them you can be who you are. You can stay who you are in your essence. It'll all work out. I am from the future. I am the adult you, and I can tell you it worked out. It's a beautiful life. You don't have to give any of this up. You don't have to bury any of this. Just let it out. Just express it. You're a part of all of this. Keep skipping through life joyfully. Don't ever lose this. This is your essence. This is who you are. You are the outside earth. Your love, your consciousness. Keep that. And I am here from the future to tell you that it all worked out. Nothing is lost. Everything is still here, waiting for us to see it. Because everything, energy, is only real when we bring our consciousness there. If we are conscious of the beauty and of the wonder of the miracle of this earth again, then we still have that greatest gift of all, of belonging and connection. And then you can get up and walk through this world, through this life, with that enthusiasm and that love and all of those beautiful things that you so loved as a child. You can start skipping through love again, and you can find that passion inside of you again, and you know that it never went away. That's always been there waiting for you. Claim it again. And it doesn't matter what anybody else says. It's you who's doing it. Let's take a few more deep breaths. And then slowly, slowly open up your eyes and come back to present time. And I thank you so much for being here. And always know that this inner wild is here. It never went away. You can always have a date, even if it's on your lawn in front of your apartment. There, anywhere, still here.
Wonderful, Elke. Thank you for that sharing. So with that, we will complete and just let everyone just kind of spend a little more time just integrating, and I just what a pleasure to be with you and experience your wild and fierce and empty heart.
It's quite full right now.
Yes, mine too. That little girl, she was like, whew. Yeah, she's it's so good for her to have company, because I think what came to me was that I had so much of that connection to the earth when I was a little girl, but what I didn't have was other humans who had that shared connection, that sacred connection. And so that's, I think, part of what this community is about, is to hear you and say, oh, I have this sister who feels that too, and oh, there's so many of us, we're all over the place. So we're together with each other as humans, and we're connecting to the earth. We get both.
Yes, that's true.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
even if we're somewhere where we are the only ones, it's still okay, because life
Yeah.
is so
It's
full
still okay.
with all these dimensions, with all the
Yes.
beings. Life will
Yeah.
always be full. So if there's anybody who doesn't have anybody, it's okay too.
Yes. It's okay too. It's okay because it all lives inside of us.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. All right. Well, have a beautiful, beautiful rest of your day. And thank you again so much. Enjoy that Gila where
Thank you.
you are.
Thank
And
you.
hopefully you will see Kat soon.
Yes, I will let you know when.
Yes.
It's just a matter
Beautiful.
of time. So thank you so
Yes.
much for having me. Lots of love to everybody.
Yes. Thank you, Elke.